The hidden meaning behind I'm fine. 2 words. That's all it is. 2 of the most common words in the English language. I'm fine. Most people hear them every day. Friends say them. Partners say them. Family members say them. Colleagues say them. Clients say them. And most of the time, nobody thinks twice about it. The conversation moves forward. Life continues. Nothing appears unusual. But experienced therapists often slow down when they hear those words. Not because they assume something is wrong. Not because they think the person is lying. And certainly not because they believe every I'm fine hides some deep psychological secret. They slow down because over time they learn something important about human beings. People do not only communicate through words, they communicate through tone, through timing, through facial expressions, through posture, through what they say, and sometimes through what they struggle to say. This means that 2 people can say exactly the same words while communicating entirely different experiences. Imagine someone walking into a room. You ask how they're doing. They smile. Their shoulders are relaxed. Their voice feels natural. They say, I'm fine. Most people would probably accept that answer. And they may be right to. Now imagine another person. You ask how they're doing. There is a pause. The smile appears a little late. Their eyes drift away. Their voice becomes quieter. They say, I'm fine. Same words, different experience. The therapist is not focused on the sentence itself. The therapist becomes curious about everything surrounding it. Because meaning rarely exists in language alone. Meaning exists in context. This is one of the first things counseling students often discover when they begin working with real people. Textbooks are full of theories, definitions, concepts, models, frameworks. But real human beings do not arrive neatly organized. They arrive with contradictions, mixed feelings, competing needs, protective strategies, and histories that continue influencing them long after the original events have passed. A person can genuinely believe they are fine while simultaneously carrying enormous stress. A person can feel overwhelmed while struggling to recognize it. A person can know exactly how they feel, but fear sharing it. And a person can learn over many years that saying I'm fine feels safer than saying what is actually happening. This is where therapy becomes less about collecting information and more about understanding experience. Imagine a client who has spent most of their life taking care of other people. Perhaps they learned early that their role was to keep the peace, to avoid burdening others, to stay strong, to remain helpful. When difficult emotions arise, they may automatically minimize them. Not because they are trying to deceive anyone, but because that way of relating became familiar, protective, comfortable. Researchers studying attachment and family systems have long suggested that people develop patterns of relating within important relationships. These patterns often begin as adaptations. A child learns what is welcomed, what is ignored, what creates connection, what creates conflict. Over time, these lessons become expectations. Sometimes they become habits so automatic that they feel like personality. The adult who says I'm fine may not be consciously hiding anything. They may simply be responding in the way they have always responded. The therapist becomes curious about that possibility, not because they want to expose something, but because curiosity creates room for understanding. And understanding often creates room for change. Now imagine another situation. A client is discussing the end of a relationship. They describe the breakup, the arguments, the disappointment, the loneliness. Then they laugh. I'm fine now. The therapist notices something. The laughter arrived immediately after sadness. Again, no assumptions are made, but a question begins to form. What function might the laughter be serving? Researchers who study emotional regulation suggest that people use many different strategies to manage difficult feelings. Some seek support, some reflect, some distract themselves, some intellectualize, some become humorous, some minimize. These strategies are not inherently good or bad. Most exist because they helped at some point. Humor can create distance from overwhelming pain. Minimization can help someone keep functioning during crisis. Distraction can provide temporary relief. The problem occurs when a protective strategy becomes the only available strategy, when every painful feeling is met with humor, when every disappointment is minimized, when every difficult conversation is avoided. The person may remain protected, but they may also remain disconnected from parts of themselves. This is why therapists often pay attention to seemingly small moments, not because small moments are always important, but because important things often appear in small moments. A slight hesitation, a glance away, a change in breathing, a nervous laugh, a long pause, a smile that arrives while discussing heartbreak. These moments can reveal emotional realities that words alone struggle to capture. Perhaps nowhere is this more evident than with shame. Shame is one of the most powerful emotional experiences human beings can have. Researchers suggest that shame is deeply connected to belonging, acceptance, connection, the fear of being seen as inadequate, unworthy, defective. Because shame feels so painful, people often develop ways of moving away from it. They joke, they minimize, they change the subject, they become highly analytical, they criticize themselves before anyone else can. Many people become so skilled at avoiding shame that they no longer notice the avoidance itself. Yet therapists often become attentive to these patterns, not because they are searching for shame, but because shame frequently hides beneath everyday conversations. A client says, "It's stupid." The therapist wonders. A client says, "It wasn't a big deal." The therapist wonders. A client laughs after describing something painful. The therapist wonders. Notice the pattern. Therapy is not about immediately knowing. It is about becoming curious. Curiosity is one of the most underestimated therapeutic skills. Many people assume therapy is built around insight, interpretation, advice, solutions. But before any of those things become useful, there must first be curiosity. Curiosity allows therapists to remain open. It prevents premature conclusions. It creates space for complexity. And human beings are complex. A person may say, "I'm fine," because they genuinely feel okay. Another may say it because they fear being judged. Another may say it because they do not yet understand their own emotional experience. Another may say it because they spent years learning that vulnerability was unsafe. The words remain identical. The meanings do not. This is why experienced therapists often listen differently. They are not simply listening for facts. They are listening for process. How is this person relating to their emotions? How are they relating to other people? How are they relating to themselves? What happens when discomfort appears? What happens when vulnerability approaches? What happens when sadness enters the room? What happens when anger appears? The answers to these questions often reveal far more than the original story. In many ways, therapy becomes an exercise in slowing down. Modern life encourages speed. Quick answers, quick conclusions, quick distractions. Yet emotional understanding rarely operates at the same pace. Meaning often emerges slowly. Patterns emerge slowly. Self-awareness emerges slowly. The therapist who immediately accepts every statement at face value may miss important opportunities for exploration. The therapist who assumes every statement hides something deeper may create unnecessary complexity. The art lies somewhere in between. A willingness to remain curious. A willingness to observe. A willingness to notice. Without rushing. Without forcing. Without assuming. Over time, clients often begin noticing these things too. They begin recognizing their own patterns, their own protective strategies, their own habits of relating. What once felt automatic becomes visible. And once something becomes visible, new possibilities emerge. A person who always says, "I'm fine," may eventually discover they are actually exhausted, or lonely, or grieving, or angry, or frightened, or hopeful, or all of these things at once. Not because someone told them what they were feeling, but because they were given enough space to find out for themselves. Perhaps that is why therapists become interested in such ordinary moments. Because ordinary moments are where human beings reveal themselves. Not through dramatic confessions, not through extraordinary breakthroughs, but through small interactions that occur every day. A pause, a smile, a laugh, a shift in posture. 2 simple words. I'm fine. Most people hear an answer. Experienced therapists often hear the beginning of a conversation. If you followed the first 3 videos, you may have noticed something. Good therapy is rarely about finding the perfect question. And it isn't about analyzing people from a distance. It's about creating the conditions where people can gradually reveal themselves. Which raises a fascinating question. What actually causes someone to open up? Why does a client spend weeks avoiding a topic and then suddenly share something they've never told another person? In the next video, we're going to explore one of the most important moments in therapy. The moment a client finally decides it's safe enough to let someone else see what's really happening underneath. See you there.